At Iowa Public Radio, we connect you to the news, music, information, and ideas that shape your world every day. And the Iowa Public Radio app is your connection everywhere you are. Listen live, read the news, enjoy a podcast or your favorite music. Send us a comment or message. Download the IPR app to stay connected. Search IPR in the Apple or Android App Store. Or download it now at ipr.org/app.
This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebbe. The sumac along Iowa's roadways has turned bright red, but our fall color is a little behind schedule this year. Our resident fall color expert, Mark Vitosh, DNR District Forester, is here to tell us what's going on. Hello, Mark.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here. And fall color is behind schedule. I'm not imagining that, right?
Well, if you look at a lot of the information out there, it usually says sometime between late September and mid-October. So we're still in the range, but, you know, I think back every year when we do this show and we talk about fall color, it's usually the first week of October or the second week. And most times when we've done this, it seems like there's quite a bit more fall color than we're seeing right now.
All right. So we're within the zone of normal, but on the later side this year.
Feels that way a little bit, yes.
What triggers the changes? Because obviously day length, that doesn't change from year to year. What are the combination of factors that triggers the change?
Well, the big trigger is day length. Basically, there's little sensors in the plants or in the leaves that basically are triggered and start to do things. The challenge is, I mean, obviously, the days get shorter, the nights get longer. That starts the process. But we also, this time of year, normally start to get cooler temperatures, and that really hasn't come yet. I was looking at the extended forecast before the show today, and it's going to stay pretty warm for at least the next couple of weeks, but I did notice the nights are going to start to cool off. So hopefully that'll help process things a little bit and get things moving along. But when it stays warm, things just kind of, if they have good growing conditions, they just kind of keep hanging out.
And thinking about bright sunny days and cooler nights, isn't that the magic formula? If these nights get cooler, that could mean a good show?
It is the magic formula, but the last couple years I keep mentioning drought. And I looked at the drought monitor this morning, and a couple weeks ago, everything was white on the map, meaning everything was normal. But I noticed this morning, especially in eastern and southeastern Iowa, we're getting to that abnormally dry, starting to turn yellow. And one thing I've noticed with some of the trees like cottonwood and walnut and a few others that turn kind of yellow, some of those are kind of bleaching out a little bit or just kind of fading because it has been dry. So even though we have those cool nights, clear days, that is good for producing, especially the purples and some of the reds. But if it's dry, that could kind of cause things to dry out a little bit.
Okay, so we could go from green to crispy instead of green
and some
to
colors,
something lovely.
you know, we may see that. Like, I really love hickory, bitternut hickory, and shagbark hickory. But in years where it's drier, sometimes you don't get those bright yellows. You get kind of the tannins and the browns and stuff. But if we get the right conditions, sometimes you get those brightness. So I think, you know, hopefully I will get people to think that it may not be so good, and hopefully I'm wrong and it just turns out wow. But if it starts to fade, then they won't be shocked either. And it could be in between. You know, I've learned doing this that you just never know. We can talk about it all we want, but you got to wait to see what happens sometimes.
All right, you're not psychic is what you're telling me, Mark.
No.
I'll accept that. Before I want to talk about some of your favorite trees to watch change in the forests around Iowa, but before we do that, remind me again why trees do this.
Well, we live in a zone basically where we have seasons. And those seasons cause most plants to go dormant. So at some point, most of our trees and most of our plants in this region of the country go dormant. And so as we get to that point, what trees are doing, they're basically, they're green this time of year, most trees. There's some exceptions, but the leaves, excuse me, are green. And that's green chlorophyll. That's the pigment that's showing that green color. Well, as time goes, as we get close to starting to go dormant, that chlorophyll starts to break down. And as it breaks down, it uncovers other pigments like the yellows, the oranges, that are just kind of hanging out and getting ready. But that tree is basically preparing itself for winter and preparing itself to go dormant. So it's taking material, and what happens in the leaf, there's a thing called a corky layer or abscission layer that this time of year starts to develop basically between the leaf stem and the branch, and that starts to basically clog up that system, that plumbing system. And as that gets clogged up, that chlorophyll breaks down, gets a lot of that nutrients and carbohydrates, gets moved back to the tree for storage in the wintertime, and then that leaf falls off. And that tree then hopefully is ready for winter and ready for the season.
And it just happens to happen in the most beautiful way possible. Mark, tell me about some of your favorite trees to watch in the forest.
Well, for years, one of my favorites, and there's just not a lot of it left because of the emerald ash borer, but one of my favorites was actually white ash. White ash has a nice purple fall color, and usually it came kind of early. That you'd have the greens of a lot of the oaks, and then you'd see these spots of purple. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing to see and beautiful mix. Again, we're not seeing very much of that because most of our ash have declined or died, but I have to remember it. And hopefully someday, through whatever process, some of those trees will come back. Some of those trees are still present in our urban areas where people have treated their trees, so we still get some of that purple, but that was one of my favorite. And I'm going to stay on a kind of a purple theme here early is my next one. Actually, one of my newest ones is Chinkapin oak. It has kind of a maroon red. It's not a super common tree, but it is native to our woodlands, sometimes in rocky outcrops, kind of tough sites, but it has a very nice fall color. And a partner that I've always liked with that is white oak. It has kind of a maroon purple. And with these, they kind of depend on those cool nights and clear days because they have those what we call anthocyanins, which give us those purples and those reddish colors. Those are actually produced in the leaf later in the year, later in the fall. So they're not there just waiting. They actually depend on the weather conditions during the day when you have those nice, good, clear days, produce a lot of sugars. That gets in the leaf, but that gets trapped on cool nights, and that helps produce those anthocyanins. So those weather conditions can have a big impact, but those come. Then I mentioned hickory,
and the oaks do change a little later than other species, right?
Yes. So sometimes, it just gets cold early. We get a cold snap, and you don't really get to see the color. So sometimes you don't always get to see them. So when I do get to see those purples, I really enjoy them because we don't always see them every year to the same degree. A lot of that, again, is weather dependent. But I mentioned bitternut hickory earlier. The yellows of bitternut hickory, some people call it pignut or smooth bark hickory. Another one with that is shagbark hickory. They can have a real yellow golden color. And again, a lot of these things may only last 5 days, 6 days, a week and a half, again, depending on the weather. But it's kind of like those spring flowers. You get that moment to see those different characteristics. The one thing that happens when it gets kind of dry on some of the hickory. Like I said, they'll get kind of a brown mix to them and not look as good. And then my last one is I think everybody loves, but I love sugar maple in our uplands, especially on our north hills and our east hills. It's one of the earlier ones that you see in the woodlands after ash and walnut, and cottonwood in the bottoms and some of those. But those sugar maples with their yellows and sometimes orange and sometimes even red, depending on where they're located and stuff, just really help with the mix. And then my last one is green. I actually like the green of the red oaks as all these other colors are turning bright and having those speckling and patches of green. Normally red oak turns red, which is beautiful too, but that green character amongst all those other colors sometimes really helps the show.
And do you try, you're out all the time, of course, as a forester, but do you try to mindfully get out during different parts of the season so that you can enjoy the different phases?
I do in my travels and stuff, but my wife and I, we've been married over 36 years, and for 40 years, we try to make an annual trip to Palisades Kepler State Park near Mount Vernon. We went there in high school, and we try to see the yellows and the oranges. There's a lot of maple there mixed in with oak, and there's rocky bluffs along the Cedar River, and you can walk up in the park and then look across and see those. And we try to do that annually every year, to even if it's for a half an hour, to take a walk up on the trail. And usually when we get there, there's a gazillion cars in that park because everyone's doing the same thing.
Right, right. So before we run out of time, if people want a good report on fall color, if they're going to make a drive, let's say along the Mississippi or to their favorite state park, of course, they can go to iowadnr.gov or just search for the fall color report. But foresters all over the state are going to keep us up to date, right?
Correct. And actually the first report went out, I believe, Wednesday, and it basically said things are green. But they're coming, hopefully.
We will keep our eyes peeled. Again, you can go to iowadnr.gov or just search for Fall Color Report Iowa. Mark Vitosh is DNR District Forester. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Erin Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. See you next time.